Welcome back to season 2. Thank you so much for coming to the show. I just want to take time to tell the viewers that we appreciate you more than anything. We have so much that we worked so hard to bring to you and show you. We have great contributors this season. We have amazing topics, some that are kind of hard to talk about. We've raised the bar. So let's come together as a community, as a unit, use our voices, and show the world that we can be so much more once we unite.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring.
And even as she taught us to keep our family at the center of our world, she also pushed us to see a world beyond ourselves. She taught us to be conscious and compassionate about the struggles of all people, to believe public service is a noble cause and the fight for justice is a shared responsibility. That led me to become a lawyer, a district attorney, attorney general, and a United States senator. And at every step of the way, I've been guided by the words I spoke from the first time I stood in a courtroom. Kamala Harris, for the people. And while this virus touches us all, we gotta be honest, it is not an equal opportunity offender. Black, Latino, and Indigenous people are suffering and dying disproportionately. And this is not a coincidence. It is the effect of structural racism, of inequities in education and technology, healthcare and housing, job security and transportation, the injustice in reproductive and maternal health care, in the excessive use of force by police, and in our broader criminal justice system. This virus, it has no eyes, and yet it knows exactly how we see each other and how we treat each other. And let's be clear, there is no vaccine for racism.
For more discussion, I'd like to bring in our early talk contributor, civil rights activist, Raymond Brown. Hi, Mr. Brown. How are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good, and thank you for that kindly introduction.
Tell us a little bit about her history.
When she first ran for San Francisco, prosecutor of San Francisco first, what I read was that she didn't run under the ethnic background of Black. She reigned under the woman of color or Indian descent.
I heard that as well.
Again, I understand that she is a Hollywood socialite. Kamala Harris did not come to prominence until she ran for the U.S. Senate. During her time in California, she was pro-police, pro-mass incarceration individual.
Mr. Brown, to add to that, I wanted to talk about the Kevin Cooper case because that was brought up on defense of Kamala as well. So I want to read a little bit about that and tell our viewers the facts about that case too. So I'm just going to take a quick second. It says in 1985, she prosecuted a Black man named Kevin Cooper, who was convicted of hacking and murdering 4 people in a family in 1983. In 1985, he was then placed on death row, but has continued to maintain his innocence over the years. Along with his claims, there have been serious concerns over his conviction. For example, an 8-year-old witness described the perpetrators as 3 white men. According to an investigation column from the New York Times, brown and blonde hairs were found in the victim's hands, yet Cooper had black hair and an afro at the time. In fact, sheriff deputies never found Cooper's hair or even his fingerprints at the scene. One woman even called police and told them that she believed the murderer was her boyfriend and a man who was already a convicted murderer. After she found his bloody overalls and noticed that a hatchet had gone missing. Still, police proceeded to investigate Cooper, who had been found hiding near the family's home after escaping from prison on a burglary conviction. Decades later, in 2016, Cooper's attorneys filed a clemency petition insisting that newly available DNA testing would exonerate him. However, Harris's office refused to allow that DNA testing. It wasn't until 2018 when Harris, now in the Senate, said in a Facebook post that she hoped the state would allow DNA testing for Cooper's case. That finally moved forward last year after Gavin Newsom was elected governor of California. What do you know about that?
Well, again, that's an example, as one example of many cases that Kamala Harris was, when she was state attorney general at the time. Now, we must have a forgiving heart. People do make mistakes, but my problem is this. She have never really apologized for the mass incarceration, and we know what that means. Three strikes you out, habitual offender, the habitual offender law that was passed by Congress, and the states picked it up and passed the same laws on the books. First of all, you have the worst president in the White House, the worst president America have ever noticed. His background, his attitude, his anti-Black statements. We must get rid of him. However, you must agree that if Joe Biden wins, let's be clear, we're gonna vote for Joe Biden. We don't have to actually vote for Kamala. If Joe Biden get our vote, she win automatically. The vice president don't need electoral votes. Okay? We want to be very careful how we go about dealing with the politics of our nation. Because if, in fact, you're going to be on the side of right, we want to be clear that as progressive, I consider myself a progressive. I consider y'all as a progressive because y'all look at things a little different than everybody else. Now, if Joe Biden get in there, we hope he do. We're going to be on post, on standby as leaders. You understand? Watching every move they make.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Brown, for joining us, and we'll see you later on in the show.
Thank you.
All right. So Kamala Harris, let's shake the conversation. C's, what is your opinion? What are your thoughts on her being the pick as vice president?
Well, it was like I just said previously, I think it's we can't afford to sit on the sidelines this time. If you're in our community and you didn't vote, it's time to stand up and vote. It's time to correct what was wrong in this country. And I think we could do that. I think that Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris for whatever reason. I mean, as we know, a vice presidential pick always has to get vetted. Kamala Harris was his pick. The good people of South Carolina pushed Joe Biden across the finish line in the primaries. And I agreed with it. I think Joe Biden is one of the most seasoned politicians at a time like this that we could have. And again, I wish that it was Stacey Abrams. I wish that it was Susan Rice. Susan Rice has a decorated history and a decorated working career. She's just about worked every serious government job on a presidential cabinet level. But Kamala Harris, I mean, I don't agree with some of the things that she did. I'm pretty sure that a lot of us don't agree with the things that she did. But politically, I see a way forward. I see a way forward for our community. Kamala Harris, to me, this is an opportunity. Not just for Kamala Harris, but for our community. I think that politically, once hopefully Joe Biden is elected, we have to keep the pressure on this particular administration. And what I mean by that is if anybody can right the wrong of what had happened previously, some of the things that she may have been involved in, which is fact, that she was involved with. Politically, for our community, it's the perfect way to say in so many words that where is the bill that's going to correct these wrongs? And if these wrongs are not corrected, vice president or not, she will not go on to be president. Right now, she's in a good position. If the Biden administration does well, it's possible that she could be elected president after Biden's terms. And I say terms. I don't say one term. I say terms. At the end of the day, Biden has the last word. But politically, our community have a serious opportunity to apply pressure and basically state or put into action what we want this administration to correct. And Kamala Harris knows what needs to be corrected in the courtroom. We have criminal justice reform that we want. If there's anybody that could make serious change and knows all the tricks of the trade, it's Kamala Harris. And I urge my black community, I urge them to take this situation up. Take it up and let's politically take it by the horn and take the very weapon that was used against us and put it right in front of the Biden administration. Kamala Harris, if you don't correct this wrong, you will not be the first woman president of the United States. That politically is the positioning that our community has to take moving forward. I know it's controversial to Kamala Harris supporters. I mean, the woman brought in $40 million into the Biden campaign the first day. That's impressive. Still, even in that, there is a huge opportunity for our community to call a spade a spade. And we know that this is an opportunity that we need to take now. You know,
do you really feel like that? Because if we take it even to Trump for an example, he's been in office for 4 years. I think that man has done everything that you could possibly do to get impeached. He has cases on him for rape. He has cases on him for fraud. He has cases on him for the Russian debacle, right? And he's still in office. Right. There's been people from the rich to the poor to the black to the white who have been trying to push him out, who have been telling him, do this or we're going to kick you out. And I think when somebody is the president of the United States, from what we've seen, not talking about stats or what's on paper or what are the rules, sometimes you can say so much, but there's only so much you can do once they are in office. So for me, I think that, yes, we can tell these people, if you don't do this, we're going to do that. But once they have that seat, how much can we really do? So this is why it's so important to me that we educate each other to know who's running for Senate.
That's right.
Who's running for a mayor? Who's going to be the district attorney? Look at who's over the Breonna Taylor case, and look who's not arrested.
Yes.
So we have to understand who has the power and how we can shake the tables with them and how we can move them first, and then worry about the president of the United States. Because in my opinion, I believe that's just like a mascot for the United States of America. Whoever the president is, okay, that's who the world knows. But if we really want to make change, we have to know who is in the court systems.
Who's in control? Who
has the power to do what? As you watch our show later, we're going to have a guest on here. Her name is Kara, and she goes into the mask mandate, and we just kind of talk a little bit more about who has the authority to push that. And it's not necessarily the president. So we have to understand, as he said, who has the power, and not just think one person has the power to change our lives, because that's just not the case.
I feel like as a people, we exclude things that we don't have to. In other words, we have moves on the court, on the board, on this chessboard, and there are moves, ladies and gentlemen, that we have. But in order to know what those moves are, like you said, we have to be educated on the facts, and we have to get a little bit more deeper into politics. And because politics is the only way we can push the ball forward. And what I mean by that is politics involves laws. It involves who can do what and when. It involves who gets a step up and who doesn't. It involves who votes. Through the lens of politics is how we can improve our community. And we have some weapons, if you will, that's important. We cannot have a weapon and go to war and say exclude that weapon, because we are literally in a war for our lives out here. We've seen what COVID has done. We've seen how communities, and we've seen crime go up like that. We have weapons on the board that we must take up and we must use. To exclude anything at this point is a life-changing mistake. So I encourage the viewers. I understand they don't like Kamala Harris, but
no, some people like her.
Some people do. I take that back. Yes, some people do. But we cannot make the perfect the enemy of the good. So in other words, we cannot, because things aren't exactly perfect the way we want them, we can't say that we won't participate if we know that it'll move the ball forward. It could be a little wrinkled, if you will, and it could help us though. So we have to look at things somewhat like that, because that's what the reason why, like you had stated before, why is Trump still in office? And people have been trying to get him out. But one of the reasons why he's getting away with it is because the Republicans have the control across the whole government. And this is the problem when people don't vote. When people don't vote, you give away your power, you give away your people, you give away blood that people that came before you shed. So as a people, we got to step up, we got to move forward, and sometimes we ain't gonna like everything. But you know what? Other people have bitten the bullet, and they've stepped up, and they've kept going. So that's what we need to do. We need to bite the bullet, step up, and let's keep it moving.
Hey everybody, this is Rizzo Denise. Be sure to go on to Amazon.com and get your copy of Wrath of a Scorn Past. See you there.
We on the wave and we can't stop now. We on the wave and we can't stop now. Models up in here, got their hands in the air, got bottles in the air, it's a party up in here. We on the wave and we can't stop now. We on the wave and we can't stop now. Models up in here, got their hands in the air, got bottles in the air, it's a party up in here. Only code is respect yourself. Jewelry's a must to express yourself. Models up in here, just relax yourself. More models getting paid that enhance your wealth. Only the real is the card you dealt. Stripe after stripe, put it under your belt. Mommy getting paid, blowing up like grenades. Living model life, no time for the shade. We on the wave and we can't stop now. We on the wave and we can't stop now. Models up in here, got their hands in the air, got bottles in the air, it's a party up in here. We on the wave and we can't stop now. We on the wave and we can't stop now. Models up in here, got their hands in the air, got bottles in the air, it's a party up in here.
What's a slow beat to you?
You want me to describe it? Or
Like it.
Let me stop.
Yeah, we was ready to go.
Nah.
Reparations. According to Reuters, Lloyd's of London, the insurance market apologizes for its shameful role in the 18th and 19th century Atlantic slave trade. They go on to say that they pledge to fund opportunities for Black and ethnic minority groups. In a statement they wrote, recent events have shown a spotlight on the inequality that Black people have experienced over many years as a result of systemic and structural racism that has existed in many aspects of society and has unleashed difficult conversation that we were long overdue. T.I. wrote in an open letter demanding that the UK insurance company pay reparations to descendants of African slaves due to the company's ties to the transatlantic slave trade. In T.I.'s IG, he wrote, our people have been financially impaired and economically disabled due to the systemic oppression and institutional racism it leaves behind. Time to take what we know our ancestors deserved and died for. End quote from Tip Harris. Now I want to bring on the show activist, artist, and co-founder of Floor Royalty Crew. Did I say that right? Floor Royalty Crew, Chad Davis.
What's happening, everybody? What's going on? Good evening, good evening.
Good evening, Chad. Thank you for being with us. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions regarding reparations and your thoughts on it. So my first question is, do you think African Americans should get reparations?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
And
yes.
why?
I believe that African American people should receive reparations. I believe that peoples in the African diaspora, not just African Americans, but Afro-Caribbeans, Afro-Latinos, anywhere you see African people throughout the diaspora, not just here in the U.S., but in South America, in the Caribbean, and even in the continent of Mama Africa, they should all be receiving reparations. The reparations should be delivered on the part of the U.S., the United Kingdom, UK, France, basically, and also Spain. Yes. Any country that has had any type of involvement in the transatlantic slave trade should be responsible for reparations. The U.S. is known for adopting the worst forms of the black codes, the Code Noir. So they should definitely be discussing reparations. And reparations should not be a thing that's just dangled over the heads of Black people when voting time comes. Reparations should be a thing that's actively discussed.
Okay, so if elected, do you think Joe Biden will sign into law a reparations bill?
I think the reparations bill was named HR 40, and I have yet to hear them discuss that. I believe that if the current movement that's been in place since late May, early June, continues to stay on the necks of politicians at this time, it could very well likely be a possibility that these things do happen.
All right.
Yeah.
I want to read this chat. This is T.I. Through the website usorelse.org. He writes on the petition, 10% of the ownership of the Lloyds of London be given to us, the descendants of African slaves. The ownership will be administered by a consortium created by the board of directors that will consist of African American leaders, attorneys, financial executives, and alike. So my question to you is, who would be on that board of directors? And also, do you think the federal government should use their power for transparency concerns?
On the board of directors, would probably consist of it would consist of attorneys. It would consist of some of the greatest scholars you can think of.
I wonder if they might include people from the Black Caucus. What do you think?
Them too. The Congressional Black Caucus would definitely be included, I believe.
See, do you have something you want to say?
Well, yeah, I think that I think we need voices from all over our community to basically get their chime in, because this is a big issue right here. I mean, first of all, whoever's on that board, we want to make it to wherein the people who benefit from reparations, we want it to be people that, everyday workers from our community. We want to in other words, I don't want them to make a bill, pass a reparations bill that Black folks cannot reach. You understand? Like people that work everyday jobs, maybe essential workers, people like that. I wanted to make it to wherein everyday Black folk can benefit from reparations, and it's not going to be a Black people who just have money
or just a one-time payment. I like what T.I. is trying to implement. I think it should be a system that would really help the community for generations to come. I want to ask you another question, Chad. Do you think there should be some sort of threshold or line that should be met in order for those African Americans who want to participate? There is argument that we have been here already. Some Blacks, the indigenous people, aborigines, I believe. Some of us were on this land. So do you think it should be, I know you said before who you believe should get the reparations. Do you think people who are just Black period should get them? Or do you think that they should have enforced or been victims of slavery who have been kidnapped and had to work for free?
It shouldn't. A lot of us have ancestry that ties directly towards ancestors who have been enslaved or have escaped from slavery and everything, or you know what I mean. So it should definitely be going to us. Those of us who are descendants of people who were held captive, those of us who were affected by policies that basically were just slavery, except you having a whip cracked on your back. I believe it should go to all of us. And as far as countries that are involved in giving the reparations and whatnot, I believe that the reparations that come in, I do personally believe that it should include Black people that are living in several countries, the Caribbean islands. There has to be something that anyone that's responsible of course, Britain is going to be responsible for all the English-speaking islands in the Caribbean, and as well as all those of us in America. You know what I mean?
Right. I understand.
I do believe that it should be going directly to us. Look at Haiti, for instance.
Yes.
The country of Haiti is still being advertised as poor and blah 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 blah, and the fact that they became the first free Black republic because they actually fought for their own freedom against France. The fact that France is still taxing them for their revolt to this day. That alone, right there, to me personally, it doesn't. I'm not gonna say that it doesn't matter that victims get it. Victims of slavery get the reparations directly, or descendants of those who were enslaved get it directly. What I'm saying is that it should be the majority of us in the diaspora that get it. There shouldn't be like a threshold or any type of limitation or any type of qualifying question or nothing like that that stops us from getting certain things.
Okay.
If the government can offer stimulus checks to people in a pandemic, they can offer reparation checks to Black people.
That's what blew my mind. I remember when it was talked about not too long ago, before COVID happened, and their argument was like, it can be in the trillions, we don't have enough money to fund it. Then boom, COVID happened. And you see all this money coming out of nowhere. And people who are applying for unemployment are getting $600 a week, not one-time payment, a week, plus what they were getting on top of unemployment. So for an example, if you had a person who was getting $182 a week for not working at all, they would get that plus the $600. And so just imagine people who have families, they would get more than $182 because you had to feed them, plus food stamps, plus, as you said, the stimulus check, which we're supposed to be getting another one before the end of the year. So I think this is why politics is so corrupt. We need to start telling the truth. If you want to give us no money, say you don't want to give us no money. Stop saying you don't have it, because you have it.
Yeah, you know what?
They have the money. I mean, they have the money to give. They are sitting here flying in private jets, traveling in limousines, traveling in nice SUVs, able to pay for, they have access to the best healthcare that money can buy.
Absolutely.
And they're sitting here telling us, lying to our faces, even though we are the ones that elected them in our respective states and counties.
Hold on, I want to get Seasoned. I think he what do you have to, you think you have something to say? Hold on, Chad. What do you guys say?
No, I just wanted to say that they will do what they're pressured to do. In other words, there is not enough pressure on these politicians to pass a reparations bill. I think that with the current events that's been going on, I think there's definitely momentum now to pass reparations. But again, you know, just like Rizzo, like you said, with the $600 a week that they're getting, there is plenty of money to pass a reparations bill. They just don't want to, because they don't want to ruffle the feathers of power. You know, they don't want to, they're not pressured into, you know, again, making reparations happen. So I think as voters, we have to pressure them. And I think the time is now.
I think also you see from history, I always tell people to do your research, know your history. You had the Jews who got the reparations. The most recent group was Japanese Americans. And I think what's sad is we as a Black community always have to prove why we should get anything or why we should have a right to be human. And that has to stop too. It's almost like when another group comes forth and they want something, it almost happens immediately. But when it comes to us, you even have people who look like us saying we shouldn't get it. There's people that I've seen who went to Congress saying that we should just have better education. And it's just like, come on. What are you talking about? Just be quiet. If you don't think we should get it, then don't say anything at all. It doesn't make sense that all these other races, these groups, get those benefits, but we have to fight 5 times as harder to get what other people are also getting. So I'm looking forward to see the turnout and what's going to happen. In closing, Chad, what do you have to say as your final thoughts to this topic?
Well, what I would say to everybody is that, of course, I would not argue with anyone who believes anything against human rights. I would not argue with anybody who doesn't believe that Black people should get reparations. I would not argue with anybody that thinks that we're way too widespread to receive reparations, to receive a check so that people can so that people can actually use it to benefit themselves. Too long have we heard the stories of people who make music say that they come from grave conditions. They're speaking about their realities growing up in communities where it's very hard to get out because you have so much negative elements at play. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like I would not argue with anyone who believes that we should continue to keep fighting, we should continue working hard and blah blah blah, and then changes are gonna happen. No, I would not argue with that. I mean, I wouldn't argue with anybody who thinks that way because they're used to bootstrap mentalities, and bootstrap mentality does not really get anybody far. What do you say to somebody who's worked their entire life and is still having the ladder pulled from them as soon as they try to climb it?
Absolutely.
Or they have their wings cut off before they can even fly, or they have their legs taken from under them before they can even walk, or they can't even crawl. Like, that is literally what's been happening to us for so many centuries, and it has to stop. So I'm definitely on board with reparations, and we need to put, I agree with Blake, we need to put more pressure on these politicians who are supposed to be representing us and want to just make fancy speeches just to get votes. Listen, we need to put more pressure on them. I don't care if we have to march in the streets. I don't care if we have to take the extreme measures that we took way back in June. We are going to, I'm telling you, we are going to continue to apply pressure where it is necessary. So, yes, we shall make our voices count, be it not just at the polls, but in the streets as well, too.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Chad, for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
If you would like to be a guest on Early Talk with Rizzo Denise, hit us up.
$50% off.
Oh my God.
Yeah, 50% off. Off everything? Off everything. Off everything? Yeah. The Mon Ben Beauty Supplies and Accessory Store got 50% off everything, which means you can buy something nice for your girl.
Oh my God.
Tell your sister to tell her friends to save on everything. Mon Ben Beauty Supplies and Accessories, 211 Broadway, Amityville, New York, 11701.
All right, so welcome back. Next topic is about fun fact about blacks. So, C's, I want to ask you, who do you believe is the richest person in history on paper, on record?
I don't know. You said who is the richest person in history?
Yes, on record. Who is the richest person in the world?
Well, let's see. Who is the richest person in history?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Okay, so viewers, the richest person on record, his name was Mansa Musa. Now, he was worth over $400 billion. The only person that can come close to him was Rockefeller, who was estimated around $338 billion. Mansa Musa was so rich, he would just give gold to the poor. Look him up, check him out, Mansa Musa. We'll be back after these commercials. Welcome back. Back in July, Jack Brewster from Forbes published a piece that I want to quote from. He stated how 19 states have not mandated masks. 18 of the states are run by Republicans. In the piece I want to read, Republican governors in 18 states have yet to issue a mask mandate. Idaho, Utah, Arizona, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Iowa, Missouri, Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Alaska. Wisconsin is the only state led by a Democratic governor, Tony Evers, that has not mandated facial coverings. The virus has surged in some of these states, with 9 of the 19 states yet to issue a mask mandate, reporting a greater than 10% rise in new infections over the last 7 days. Idaho, Alaska, Wyoming, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi, and New Hampshire. Even as they encourage mask use, some governors say orders are tough to enforce, while others, like Governor Brian Kemp, say a mandate infringes on personal freedoms. Last week, Kemp sparked controversy when he sued the city of Atlanta for its mask mandate. Nearly 1/3 of countries in Florida have mandated masks, and despite the lack of statewide order from Governor Ron DeSantis. All right, I want to bring in boxing analyst, 2-time Golden Glove champion, and NBC's The Biggest Loser, and early talk contributor, Kara Castronova. How are you doing, Kara?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. I have a question. Why is it overwhelmingly Republican governors in red states who come to the dance late, if you will, when it comes to wearing a mask?
Well, I think that's a question that's it's a sort of a loaded question, if you don't mind my saying, because I don't think the Republican governors are late to the dance. I think that it's the Democratic governors who are in the wrong here. I don't think that a mask mandate is constitutional, and nor do I think it's necessary. So I think that the Democratic governors that are putting out this mask mandate are actually the ones that are wrong here and actually hurting their states more than the Republicans in this case. And I don't consider myself a Democrat or Republican, but when it comes to this issue, I definitely have to side with, unfortunately, the Republican governors, and the one seemingly sane right now, Democrat Tony Evers, who is not doing the mask mandate. And that is because it has been proven time and time again by actual credible scientists and not propaganda artists like Dr. Fauci that masks do not work. It says it straight up on the box that you purchase, or on Amazon when you purchase your cute little pink mask with like cat whiskers on it, whatever these things that they're selling out there now, there is a disclaimer that says this does not prevent coronavirus. So why is there a mask mandate if it is common knowledge and all these mask companies are acknowledging the fact that there's no scientific data to prove that they prevent the virus? Secondly, the WHO and the CDC were saying from the very beginning that these masks do not prevent coronavirus, that maybe the N95 might, but not these paper masks that you see people wearing around, or these cloth bandanas, or these silky scarves. None of it works. It's just all propaganda. So back to what you were saying with the article and these governors, that they should be penalized. I know the article that you're referring to. I think that the governors that should be penalized are the Democratic governors, because they are not running their states properly. They are terrorizing the people with this pandemic scare. I'm not saying that the pandemic is fake, because I do believe that the coronavirus exists. I just believe that the reaction to it has been completely insane, and that the Democrats are using it as a tool to further their agenda, or not the Democratic part. I call it the Democratic machine, because they're just so powerful. You don't even know the forces behind it. And that's the truth, because that involves the liberal media. It involves a lot of forces that that the average person doesn't realize. And I believe that they're using this mask as a way to, more or less as a way to control the people, and to divide the people, to divide. Democrats wear masks, Republicans don't, because they're evil. They're demonizing the people that don't wear masks.
All right, let me ask you another question. For months after the country watching New York go through some of the biggest challenges New York has ever seen in almost 100 years, do you think these governors should be taken to task politically for opening too early and the lack of preparation for their state?
I don't think the governors should have ever closed the state, because I don't think that's within their power, their executive power. I don't believe the state should have ever been closed. They've never closed the state before because of a flu or anything like that. And it's just, an article just came out recently. It wasn't an article, it was actually factual data, quote unquote factual. When it comes to factual in the CDC, I don't really put the two together, but the CDC just released a statement that said there was way less COVID deaths than was predicted, that most people died from other things, and or they were not all COVID deaths. It was just people that happened to have COVID, but some other diseases that killed them. So this article came out saying there was only like 10,000 deaths. Like, the numbers were completely inflated. So that being said, I don't think that the governor should have even closed down the state to begin with. I think that they destroyed the economy. They ripped our society apart at the seams. Families aren't speaking to each other. Friends aren't seeing each other. People are committing suicide. People are drinking more than ever. Mental health is on a decline. There was a lot more deaths because of the coronavirus. People not going to the hospital because they were fearful of getting the virus, because they were so terrified. They weren't going to the hospital for their cancer treatments and stuff that actually was deadly. So a lot of people died because of that more than they did of coronavirus.
Let me ask you this. Do you think there's some of the blame for the deaths that took place on their watch, the governors who did not mandate the mask?
No, I think that a lot of deaths, I live in New York, I think Governor Cuomo was to blame on a lot of the deaths, what he did when he because the people at risk most were the nursing home, the elderly, obviously, very elderly people that he was putting them all together in the nursing home, and they were all catching it from each other. So if anybody is to blame on the large amount of deaths that New York had, it's Governor Cuomo. And I think he's solely to blame.
Okay. In some conservative circles, it was said governors who mandate masks go against the people's rights. How else did some Republicans think the nation could see a curve if there was no mandate regarding masks?
Well, I don't think it's just Republican circles. I could speak from very, very much experience in saying that I've gone to a lot of protest rallies that are anti-mask, and that it's about I would say, yes, it's 75% Republican, but there are 25% people there that are liberal, libertarian, independents that believe that wearing a mask is unconstitutional and wrong. So it's not just Republicans. I think that's been a story that's being told by the mainstream media right now that isn't true. But I think that the curve doesn't have anything to do with the masks. I think the downswing has more to do with the fact that the COVID-19 the coronavirus is essentially a flu, and it is at its worst. This is just like very much common sense. When it's cold out and it's the winter time, January, February, March, April, and then it starts to decline. It's the middle of the summer, at the end of the summer. So obviously the numbers are going to fall. And also ventilator use. I was going to just quickly touch on that. Ventilators at the beginning were being put on COVID patients like crazy, and it was really figured out by the doctors that was actually what was killing them. So once they stopped using those ventilators as much, again, the mortality rate went up.
All right. Thanks, Kara. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you later on in the show.
Thank you.
You ever heard of a saying, when it rains, it pours? Why is it when the rent's due, all of a sudden you got car problems? Well, here's a comfort to your ears. Bring your car down to 136 Railroad Street, Huntington Station, New York. Scott's Automotive. Scott's Automotive, where you get a great service from the best mechanics in town. Need a wheel alignment? Scott's Auto. Need a tune-up? Scott's Auto. Even complications like transmission replacement? Scott's Auto. For more information, dial 631-673-3915. That's 631-673-3915. Scott's Automotive, 136 Railroad Street, Huntington Station, New York.
As we know, it's not just the presidential race that's important, as we've been trying to tell everyone. It's also the Senate votes that are important, as well as who's running for governor, who's running for mayor, who's running for district attorney. So we are going to go over a few that are running. So, big seat in the state of Kentucky. We have Republican Mitch McConnell, the incumbent trying to beat newcomer Democrat Amy McGrath. Sees, what's your political take on the race?
Oh my God. I mean, you got a guy like Mitch McConnell who's been in the Senate for years.
True.
Not to mention that his wife is in Donald Trump's cabinet. So that's another thing. Mitch McConnell has held up the Senate since, Obama, his last 4 years was limited compared to his first 4.
Right.
And it probably has to do, not probably, it is. It has a lot to do with Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell has been tearing the Senate up for years. And he's never the talk of the mainstream media. The mainstream media won't tear him down the way they tear down Nancy Pelosi.
Right.
He has a lot of pull in Kentucky. The man is rich. I mean, his pull is unreal in Kentucky. This guy has killed 395 different pieces of legislation that the Democrats have passed out of the House. The Democrats have passed so many of the things that our community needs. And Mitch McConnell will not let it pass. So Amy McGrath, right?
Yes, Amy McGrath.
She needs to win that Senate seat. Now, she lost, I think it was, she was going for a Congress seat in last time around. She lost that race, I believe. And Kentucky is a rough state, man. Kentucky, if they vote, it's rough, man. Like, you have to have your politics got to be on point. So far, Amy McGrath's politics has been on point. She had the brother that she went against in the primaries. She beat the brother, and now she's going head to head with Mitch McConnell. Let's see what happens. The good people of Kentucky need to get involved, because the good people of Kentucky, we need to change majority leaders. Mitch McConnell ain't working for our community.
All right, another big race that will decide the future of Georgia. We have, is it Jon Ossoff? Sees Jon Ossoff?
Yes.
He'll try to knock off Republican David Perdue. So what's your take on this one?
Jon Ossoff, they had this thing, the Republican Party was really going at him his last time around. He also ran again, I think it was in the Congress. He lost that race. They tried to tie him to Barack Obama, tried to say he was the white Barack Obama. He did have a tone like Obama, you know what I mean? And they used that to say, and his state is kind of rough. They didn't like Obama in that particular state. They had a lot of, issues with Obama at the time for whatever reason. In my view, it was all social. It wasn't anything that had anything concrete, that was progressive or even conservative.
Do you like any of the Senates that are running out of those two?
I like Jon Ossoff. Give the young man a chance. You know what I mean? He's got fresh blood for younger people. We are in a new day. We need politicians who are going to think outside the box. Vote Jon Ossoff.
All right, and we have another Senate seat up for the taking this year in Georgia. We have Doug Jones, who's the incumbent trying to hold off.
I'm sorry, that's Alabama.
Oh.
Doug Jones, Alabama people. What's sorry? I read that wrong over here too.
All right. So, another Senate seat up for the taking this year in Alabama is Doug Jones, who's the incumbent trying to hold off Republican Tommy Tuberville. I think Doug Jones has won before.
Yes.
I think this is like his third time running. I remember Doug Jones. I used to stay in Alabama, and he did win before.
Well, Doug Jones is the one who beat the guy who was messing with underage kids.
I don't know, but he lost against somebody who's in office now. He lost against him, and the guy who's in office now has been in office for this is his second term. So I'm really glad to hear this information. I hope Doug Jones wins.
Yes.
I hope he wins.
And they say it's an uphill climb for him.
It is, yes.
You know, in the state of Alabama, Alabama is one of the poorest states in the union. So, you know, we really need a change. We need Doug Jones to win that race so he could bring more politics and progressive things out there.
Yes, there's a lot of change going on in Alabama, a lot of infrastructure. They're also trying to charge a whole lot of money just to go through the bridge there. So I really hope he wins and he fixes all of that. Now, see, do you know who's running in Alaska?
Who is running in Alaska over there?
No. And lastly, out of Alaska, we have Democrat Al Gross. Is that his name?
Yes.
Al Gross and Republican Dan Sullivan. So I know that the Democrat is actually independent, but he is...
He'll probably
he's
be
a Democrat now.
Well, he's an independent that'll probably caucus with the Democrats.
Okay.
You know, well, he might caucus with the Republicans. I mean,
we never know. Alaska's like its own little territory, kind of like Hawaii. So, kind of like you, I'm curious to see what his beliefs are, what he stands for, what he's going to do if he wins. Since you mentioned he was technically independent, and also just Alaska is so different from the United States. It's part of the United States, but I'm just saying it's not connected to the other states.
They have a lot of different issues going on up there. Like,
correct.
And and one of the reasons why they may have different issues is because I wonder what the percentage of black people is out there.
Right.
Like, you know, how they feel about things that's going on with our government right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that's a serious race to look at, because it could give the Democrats the majority in the Senate.
Of course. Absolutely.
So, but he can turn around and be like, no, I'm going to caucus with the Republicans, and that'll just upset everything, you know.
Mm-hmm. That's true. All right, we'll be back after the break. Hey everybody, this is Rizzo Denise. Be sure to go on to Amazon.com and get your copy of Wrath of a Scorn Past. See you there. Welcome back. So, according to NPR, the Census Bureau is cutting short-circuit door-knocking efforts for the 2020 census, aimed growing concerns among Democrats in Congress that the White House is pressuring the Bureau to wrap up counting soon for political gain. About 4 out of 10 households nationwide have still not participated in the constitutionally mandated count for every person living in the United States, and self-response rates are even lower in many communities. The condensed door-knocking time frame increases the risk of leaving out many people of color, immigrants, and other members of historically undercounted groups from numbers that are collected once a decade to determine each state's share of congressional seats. Electoral college votes and an estimated $1.5 trillion a year in federal tax dollars for Medicare, Medicaid, and other public services. So my question is, what's the White House's defense for cutting the census time? First Brown and then you, Kara.
Sure.
Okay. It seems like that problem is with every administration, actually. If you go back, the Obama administration, the George Bush, every president, every administration had a problem with the census. And actually, I think that poor whites and minorities, blacks, Hispanics, we don't have no interest in being counted. That's the problem. We don't understand how much important it is that our numbers, that we be counted as citizens of the United States. That's the problem. Not enough education. If people understand, look, your school gonna get funded more money. Your roads gonna get, your bridges and your roads. You're gonna get money for tuitions, college tuition, grant money, stuff like that. All that is based upon numbers. And so every administration, however, and I'm picking on Trump, under Donald Trump administration, they ain't trying to really reach out to the minority community. And so I think the problem is every president had that dilemma, and none of them have took a really serious interest in the census count. That's my opinion. Not just Trump, but all of them. But in this administration, they cutting off funding. I mean, how you gonna count 45 million people of color, 50 million people of color, if you don't have any people in the field? Now, of course, the COVID-19 virus is up on us. You can't go to nobody's house and knock on the door. It's everything is just stressed out right now.
Okay, Kara, what do you have to say? I want Kara to get a chance.
Well, really about the census being, your question was why I think that the Trump administration is pushing for the census to be wrapped up. Because I know.
Well, the White House, the White House.
As far as I understand, the census is usually completed around August, or maybe even June. And I think they extended it because of COVID this year to October or September 30th. I think it was originally October 30th, but now they're saying September 30th because they have to have all the data in by December 31st. And obviously, one of the main reasons that there is a census is so that they could, it has to do with the House of Representatives and how much representation you get there, how many delegates for the election. So that it has to be fair depending on the population. Obviously, COVID has affected it, which is sad, I think, because COVID has affected a lot of things in a negative way. And like we spoke about before, I think that the reaction to the pandemic is completely exaggerated. Like, I don't think that they should have stopped knocking on door to door. But that was pushed by the Democrats for the most part to stop any type of human interaction. So this is collateral damage, and it's unfortunate that because the agenda is no face-to-face contact, feet away, nobody could come in your house and come in your door, and this is the agenda that's being pushed by the Democratic machine. Unfortunately, the collateral damage is there's going to be no census door knocking, and that's unfortunate. Because yes, every minority and every underrepresented group should be accounted for, but at the same time, you have to understand that I think that the data has to be in by a certain time.
Okay. I wanted to ask another question. Kara, it's so obvious that Black and brown communities will be affected the most by cutting the census time. I know, Mr. Brown, you said earlier that some of us just don't even know how important the census is. A lot of us don't even know what it is, especially younger people. So, Kara, what can we do to better get the message out to our community and particularly our youth to make sure they are counted?
I don't think that many people really even understand, like the other guest said, what the census really is for. You really need to be represented in the census in order to get certain funding and to get delegates and to get representation in the House of Representatives. So I don't think that people in general, I wouldn't even just say minorities. I think that, I wouldn't say it's just minorities. I think that there's just people in general the average person doesn't understand what the census is for. Maybe they could do some sort of public service announcement and explain to people how important the census is. I don't know. Like I said, most people don't even know what it's for.
Brown, what is your take on it?
Yeah. Well, I disagree with her when she used the term Democrat. You know, I think that both parties have a problem with the census issue. To say that Democrats are telling people the COVID-19 virus should not go knock on the door, should not. I think that both parties have a problem trying to educate people regarding the census. If people was educated, she got to understand that the census is important to your well-being. Just like if you don't go downtown and pay your light bill, your light's gonna go out. Census is that important. So I think instead of try to make it look like the Democrat have been pushing the narrative, not the science, that's not the truth. The truth, the fact of the matter is, it's not a Democrat issue or Republican issue, it's an education issue. She must understand that.
So Mr. Brown, what will be your recommendation to educate more people? Not even, as Kara did say, not just the youth, people who are ignorant to the fact of how beneficial the Census 2020 is. What would you recommend to spread the word, get the message out?
Education. You can do census through songs. You can do census through portrait, hip hop, and all that other kind of stuff. Billboards, advertisement that target the young people. If you don't fill out this paper, you're not going to be accounted for. You're not going to get that education. You're not going to get the food in your house. You got to break it down to them at the lower level. You're looking at these middle class folks, and these folks got good jobs living in these fancy homes. They understand the census. When you're dealing with people on Section 8, people who are living in poverty, extreme poverty, they might, murder every day, police brutality. Their mind is not on census.
Okay. I have another question. I understand. Okay. Now, government programs would be cut in lower income communities if the census is cut. Kara, do you think the government prioritizes programs like Meals on Wheels over other programs? If so, why or why not?
I mean, I can't really say if I think Meals on Wheels is a really important program. It helps a lot of elderly people in lower income situations. I think it's a priority, but I think that there's also a lot of other priorities that the government has. In regards to the census, going back to what the gentleman said, I don't think that the census has to do with Democrats or Republicans. I was saying that the COVID narrative is being really pushed by Democrats. So just so you understand what I was saying, and that it's collateral damage that unfortunately the census is not going to possibly be as accurate. I have a question though for you. Do you think if given more time, because they're pushing for an extension, would people actually still fill out the application? I mean, fill out the forms, because I don't know if they necessarily would, just if they are given another month or two. And I just am wondering if you think that people would actually still, the people that weren't going to fill it out to begin with, are they going to do it now if they're given an extra additional time period, like 2 month?
Me or Mr. Brown?
Either one of you. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Go ahead, Ryan. You
Call me Riz, Mr. Brown. Call me Riz. No, it's okay. I think this year is very different versus a decade prior, because I have seen a lot of commercials talk about the Census 2020 and how the commercials were created. You can tell it was directed towards Black communities. I saw a commercial with a couple. They were Black and they were walking through college, and the girlfriend was talking about how important it was to fill out the Census 2020. And I also saw a commercial with a Latino woman, and she was telling people in her household how important it was, the facts regarding them in the household, how it's safe, Anybody can fill it out, even if you are legal or illegal. And also Cardi B has been promoting it a lot on her Instagram page. So I do think there's a push, but to be completely honest with you, Kara, I think it's a little too late. I think that this should have been talked about back in January, because people don't get convinced like that. You know, you can't just come out of a week prior and say, do this. You have to, as Mr. Brown said, educate and let a person know all the facts, let them know how important it is, and kind of instill it in them, like a song or just something that's repeated. But since it was so quick, because I saw those commercials like a month ago, I think it's a little too soon, too late. What do you think, Brown?
Well, I just think that that I don't think that our political leaders are interested in pushing the census. You know, I mean, they pushed the border wall. Okay, they stayed on that. Oh, we need 10 or 15 billion to build a wall. People pushed that. They pushed reopening the cities. Oh, gotta open our country back up. They marched, they demonstrated. Issues that people are concerned about, they get involved, they rally, they protest. The census, taking a back burner approach. Fill it out, you don't fill it out, it does not matter. But then again, when the numbers are tallied, the bottom line is black folks and poor white folks suffer. Not just blacks, poor white folks suffer. And so blacks suffer more because of racism and because they're trying to destroy us anyway. So basically, I think that we got to wake up the inner city. Have you ever visited a depressed inner city community? You go up to somebody out there on the street and you tell them about a census, and right now they're trying to figure out how they're gonna make it from A to Z, and you come with me some paper in my hand, talking about fill this out, they might leave you there. So what I'm saying is that, honestly speaking, that you need the hip hop community. You said Cardi B can't reach nobody.
I don't know about that. She has like 70 million followers on Instagram. She has a lot of followers, Mr. Brown, and a lot of them are a younger audience.
No. What I'm saying, they're listening at the dirty side of her music, not the positive side. Okay, she's talking about census. That's a joke to them. When you go up to those people that follow her, do you remember her talking about the census? What census? All they know is shake your ass and whatnot. I'm saying is that you need, as a matter of fact, I'm gonna give you a good example. Common and what this other guy named Legend, they just did a promo for voting rights. Look how many people caught on to that. You need people who know how to articulate to the lower socioeconomic community that have been neglected, denied, and forgotten about. Let's be honest here. Don't act like we done arrived. Some of us got a few dollars in our pocket. Let's don't act like it.
Cease, do you have anything to say about it?
Well, I would say, and actually, I just want to point out that these type of issues are not talked about in educational forums, and they should be. You know, the government should make it to wherein, in school, if this is a serious issue, Brown, I got to agree with you there, where the Democrats and the Republicans have to make this a center point of living in the United States of America. It is important for every citizen to be counted. And I really do think that they need to start putting these type of issues at the forefront in every educational forum that we have. And to point that out and to say that it's not is a political issue for voters. I mean, these are the issues that voters need to have on our minds, because we do decide. We decide the outcome of what kind of future we want in this country. And so making sure education is important, and that's why, certain politicians really push the educational part of things, because it's important. And in that education, the census should be one of the center points in every conversation.
Yeah, I was gonna add into that. You mentioned that every citizen should be counted. I didn't know what your opinion was, because I know there was a lot of controversy last year on the question that they wanted to add to the census, which was, are you a legal citizen or not? So when you said every citizen should be counted, what about, do you think that extends to non-citizens?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, there's a lot of people who came to this country not being a citizen, and now they're citizens or what have you. They should be counted because, this coronavirus is a reminder how we're all one unit. And if one is lagging, it needs to be recognized. I'm not saying that immigrants should be counted in everything, because they have to take the proper steps to be legalized. However, they participate in paying. They don't pay taxes exactly the way we do, but when they go to the store, they pay the store's taxes. When they go get food, so there are things that immigrants do that are not legal that should be counted. Now, when it comes to the census, I think that it is important that they're counted in, because they live somewhere in our communities. And we have to look at our community some like a house. Like, is the fence kept up well? Is the grass cut right? Is the property looking exactly to how it should be? Is it lined up the right way? And what that does is that adds value to the whole house. And so that's the way I think. I hope that answered the question. But, I do think that they need to be counted so the government can know exactly what the hell is going on in these communities.
Brown, do you to answer to Kara's question, do you believe that immigrants should be counted? Illegal immigrants, I'm sorry.
Because then they will therefore get representation. I mean, I think it's going to kind of skew the numbers when it comes to the delegates and the House representation. That's the concern. If they don't ask if you're an illegal immigrant and you fill out the census and you don't reveal your immigration status, then you're going to be counted as a citizen, and therefore it's going to sort of sway how everything is proportioned when it comes to voting, the delegates, and the House of Representatives, which kind of is a little bit unfair to do, in my opinion. So I could kind of see both sides, because I do think immigrants are important in America, but at the same time, I think that citizens also their vote should count 100%.
But Brown, I wanted
that's skewed like that, then the average person that is a citizen, their vote counts less, because it's, the numbers aren't correct.
I wanted to add Brown into it. Mr. Brown, do you think that the illegal immigrants should be counted on the census 2020? What is your thoughts on that?
Well, yes. I think that we can't alienate them. I don't think that they should, if they're not citizens, they should not file the papers like I'm a citizen. I mean, if you're not a citizen, you're not a citizen. Does not mean you shouldn't have a right to vote. Like Brother Blake said, you still pay tax, you still buy groceries, you send your kids to school, you invest in this economy. So you should be treated as a human being. But to have them like the lady said, the general lady, to mix them with all of us is going to create a confusion. Now you got to, now they're saying 20% of those who fill out the census are not citizens, so they don't count. They don't count. So you got a problem there. And so I think they should be counted. But the question is how you count someone who is really not a citizen of your country. It's difficult. Okay? So that's not, and you know, to add to that, the education part. I'm born in 1960. I'm 60 years old now. When I reached the 16, they frightened me so much, I signed up for the draft. They educated me. You know, when I say frightened me, they say, look, if you don't sign up for the draft, U.S. Army, you're going to lose benefits. Not going to be able to go to college. Not going to be able to get this, get that. So they need to educate the public, and that's my problem I have with this.
Cease, you want to add to anything to that?
I just want to say that we need politicians that's going to tackle real issues. And so far, we've seen in the last probably 20 years, we've seen politicians play politics around issues like this. You know, when you have people's lives hanging in the balance, you know, it's the right thing to do to want to go to Congress, to go to the Senate, what have you, and tackle these issues, because these issues are issues that divide, if you will. Like, they use them for politics. They use them for re-elections. That's the only time some people hear about these type of issues, is only when there's an election around the corner. We need politicians who need to stop playing politics and really go to work. And the only way they go to work is through people voting and people getting involved with their democracy.
Okay, so moving on to the Voting Rights Act, I do want to read an article that was written in AEI by Sharon, and it states, in a momentous 5-4 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court Tuesday invalidated a major provision in the 1965 Voting Rights Act that mandated federal oversight of election laws in states with a history of discriminatory practices. The justices concluded that Section 4B of the Voting Rights Act was no longer applicable. Nothing that voter turnout models show that minority voters are on par or exceed white turnout in many of the very states and localities that have been put under federal watch in 1965. Congress' failure to modernize the law in light of the enormous improvements in minority electoral opportunities in the states covered by the law rendered it unconstitutional. Chief Justice John R. Roberts wrote in the majority opinion of the court, Congress' failure leaves us today with no choice but to declare unconstitutional, end quote, Roberts wrote. This decision was rendered in 2013 when President Obama was in office. As we all know, in the second term of the Obama administration, the Republican Party and Mitch McConnell were voted into the majority by the voters of the country. Panel, this alone should be motivation for our communities to vote to get the Senate back in the Democrats' hands. Question, starting with Kara. Panel, this has already been passed in the House by the Democrats, so when will Mitch McConnell put this bill on the floor for passage?
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you with something. I think that we're in a really terrifying place if the Congress is, if the Senate is taken by the Democrats, but that's just my opinion. But in regards to this whole Supreme Court case, like you mentioned, the justices, it was a 5-4 decision, I believe, in the justices that actually voted to, let me rewind myself, because I'm actually going to read from Wikipedia, that they reason that the coverage formula conflicts with the constitutional principles of federalism and equal sovereignty of the states, because the disparate treatment of the states is based on 40-year-old facts. So, like, again, emphasis on 40-year-old facts, having no logical relationship to the present day, thus not responsive to current needs. So, you can't really compare, I don't think, the racism of 40 years ago to the racism of today. Yes, there is still racism, but it is nowhere near the way it was 40 years ago. So we can't really use the facts from 40 years ago to justify something today. That being said, I don't think that, I think that perhaps new legislation should be drafted, but it should not, this old bill should not be repassed. The House approved it. I don't think that they should have done that. I think they should have worked to drafting new legislation, which takes the current situation more into looking at the current situation rather than looking at a situation 40 years ago. You can't just take an old bill written 40 years ago that is no longer really applies and say, okay, let's sign this back into law. What you could write a new law that's more reflective of the time. So I think that's the solution when it comes to that.
Right, but the racism part, I will say myself, I do want to do more research on that, but there are a lot of strict laws that are being passed. Perfect example in Georgia, if your name isn't spelled the exact same way on your ID, if you don't put like D, like my name has a D for my middle name, and if I don't put D, they throw out my whole vote. That's ridiculous. So there needs to be less laws like that when it comes to voting, because that alone will just eliminate my right to vote as a citizen, and that should not be the case.
Well, why is that race? Like, I'm just wondering.
No, I was saying for me, it should be
to if you eliminate the D, wouldn't that apply to all races?
Right. That's what I was saying. The racist part. I will say in Georgia, again, in certain areas, for an example, I think this was last year when Stacey Adams was running, a lot of the low-income communities, magically the machines were going down. So that is like common sense. Why is that area not working? But you go to the rich communities, they're coming in and out. And these were actual interviews. People were saying like, oh, I just voted, it was no problem. But you had lines around the corner in these low income communities trying to get their votes in. And this isn't just an hour of them waiting. This is 4 hours. And this is older people who have disabilities. They're hot. They haven't eaten just to vote. So I think the issue that we have as a people, we have to stop always looking at stats. That's where the division comes in. You have people from more conservative, you have more people from the conservative side trying to use stats instead of just common sense as human beings to say, okay, this is wrong. Okay, something's going on in this community. Why are they waiting 4 hours? Go ahead, Mr. Brown. Go ahead.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, and I kind of is familiar with that legislation. I think the Urban League and many others, NAACP Legal Defense Fund, fought to have the Supreme Court not to pass that type of legislation, because what it did, it took away your right to challenge gerrymandering and schemes. Like, for example, if they moved polling places around and 300,000 people didn't vote, they did not have a right to go and file a lawsuit to do a recount on that election. That's your problem. You see, the Republicans, they think in their mind that racism and hate and gerrymandering and it's over. It's not over. That's the problem with this country. The problem with this country is that you have a group of people that really believe that we are free. You said 40 years ago, Sister Karen said that. Basically, we ain't start recovering doing that 40 years, 30 years into the 40 years. So really, we only had 10 years, 10 or 15 years of that 40 years to really say we made somewhat of a gain. Because every time we fought for inclusiveness, and I'm gonna give you a good example. When they got rid of the congressional district in Louisiana, black congressional district, what did they do? They gerrymandered. They say that Cleo Fields, who was congressman, called out a district that was within his favor, right? However, they eliminated his district and carved out a district that was in a white candidate favor. It did not make any sense. Again, going back to the census. The census showed that we lost district in population. So know what they did? They came back and said, filed a lawsuit blocking them from redistricting when they moved that protection from the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Lost in federal court. And they eliminated the district. This is what he's talking about, Karen. How minorities suffered under this type of law. We got to have laws where blacks are being treated fairly when they come down to voting, when they come down to district, when they come down to redistricting. That's the problem. When you move that section out of the Voting Rights Act, what you actually did, you got rid of minority voting strength. We all understand what's going on here. And I agree with you, Riz, that the Supreme Court erred in their judgment.
Okay, Kara, do you have anything to say to that?
Well, yeah, I could see where you're coming from, that I do think that, there needs to be protection when it comes to voting laws. And I think, like I said, I'll go back to what I said before. I don't think that, like, I'm going to read again from the website that I'm looking at, which is Wikipedia, that Justice Roberts wrote that the act was immensely successful at redressing racial discrimination and integrating the voting process, and noted that the U.S. has made great progress thanks to the act. But the times have changed, because regardless of how you look at the record, no one can fairly say, and I can't fairly say that it shows anything approaching the pervasive, flagrant, widespread, and rampant discrimination that Congress faced in 1965, and that clearly distinguished the covered jurisdictions from the rest of the nation. So
who is this?
we can't judge now comparing that to 1965. Like I said, yes, there should be protections, definitely legislation, but I think it needs to be rewritten. I don't think that we should be basing it on 1965 and the climate then.
Karen, it haven't changed much. So why is you saying move forward when it haven't changed? I mean, how can you move forward when the system haven't changed?
Well, I mean, I guess that's a matter of opinion. I can't say that I lived in 1965 and I was there to witness it. But from, my understanding, the climate was, I mean, I'm not going to sit here. I'm not one of those people that will sit here and say racism doesn't exist, because I don't believe that. That's true. I do believe it exists. But I don't believe it was as bad. It was the same climate as it was 40 years ago. I feel like everything kind of needs to be reshuffled and readdressed.
Wait, it is worse. Whether you believe it or not, it's worse now than it was in 1965. Okay? It's worse.
Why do you say that? And I'm listening to you because from your experience, why do you think that's the case?
I'm saying that because if you look at the demographic, do you study demographic?
When you say that, if you could just explain further.
Demographic. If you look at how minority voting strength have been diluted, do you understand what that means? Let's take for Chicago for an example. I'm gonna give you an example. I want you to take and go study it. When Harold Washington ran for mayor, you had a majority black vote. 10, 15 years later, when they passed these laws, the Supreme Court passed these laws, they crippled the power of the black vote. He lost the election. Mayor Daley come back, won the election. There was a white mayor there for almost 30 years. Do you understand?
I want to bring C's on to get his opinion real quick. C's, what do you have to say about this from your point of view?
This is again, another divisive issue. It's a divisive issue that to me, is not concentrated enough during, times where citizens aren't voting. And we have a problem. This is the tricks of a politician. A politician will get elected. They will go to the United States Senate. They will go to Congress and figure out ways on how they can stay in their chair. They try to figure out ways on how they can stay in their chair for 20, 30. They basically, what they want to do is they want to retire doing nothing. So, and they want to do that without anybody saying anything. So the problem is that what they did is the problem is structural. So it's a system problem. You rig the system so you don't have to get out of your chair. And you do that on the backs of people that you feel that can't fight back, or people that you feel that you can get away with doing that to. Unfortunately, we have politicians who do this way too often to poorer communities, or communities that they feel like they could get away with it. If the community is smaller, if they're not represented, if you can gerrymander and get away with it, they'll do it. This is why our vote, we control this thing. And we need to know who is doing what in our government, and we need to keep an eye on them, and we need to make them work.